Anyways, good morning, Team Wilpers. Good morning, Brian Hammond. How are you doing?
I am doing great. How you doing?
I'm doing okay, beside the fact that I went live early and then I had to redo everything. So hopefully people I
We
see
had like
Linda's here.
a good streak going there for like 4 weeks
I
of
know.
not having any technical difficulties. So it's a recovery week. So
It
you know,
is. Yeah, it is. So hi Amy, good morning to you as well. As I'm waiting for her to say good morning back, right? Anyways,
right.
recovery week. What's going on with you this week?
Well, I've been in recovery mode
I
since
know.
like May. So
Yeah, that's a little beyond recovery. That's
yes,
detraining. There's a
it's
difference.
like yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, no, nothing. I'm still liking and really adhering to a strict structured schedule at the moment.
Yeah,
So like life is great for me.
that's good. It is a slippery slope for me, I find, because it becomes very easy not to train really quickly. It's only been about a week and a half, and I'm like, oh, yeah. I do have a couple structured workouts, but they're pretty loose. But I went to the gym. I signed up for a gym because I know
Nice.
even though I have all the things here, I'm not going to be disciplined enough to do the strength training that I need to do. And so I'm meeting with the trainer on Friday. We'll see if I like her. But
It's
we'll
funny.
see how that goes.
I started going to the gym again this month as well. And
Yeah.
I cannot work out strength wise at home. Can't do it.
Yep.
Even
Me
if I have
neither.
all the stuff. It's a mind shift thing, right? When
It
I'm
is.
home, I just don't have that mind shift, that mental fortitude to lift. Like I feel like I'm not in the right environment. And
Right.
it goes to show like how important your training environment really is,
My
you
house does
know?
not smell like a gym. That's one of it. I don't hear the clang, clang, clang of, machines and weights and plates and all those things. And I'm like, I just couldn't get into it. And maybe this is something we want to talk to our athletes about, but they're pretty good about doing their strength, but I just can't do it at home. I don't know why. Maybe
Yeah,
I don't
it's
feel the same using I don't have a squat rack. I don't have anything here. I just have, kettlebells and some pretty heavy weights, but
well,
bell dumbbells, no
I mean,
barbells.
everything I did at the gym today, I could do at my house,
I know.
right? Or I could buy the stuff and do it at my house. But it's environment.
Yeah.
It's like, listen, if you go to a co-working space, you're probably going to be more efficient working than if you're working at home, right? If I
Right.
go to the library, like I get more work done, right?
Yeah.
Because you're just in the environment of like, oh, this is what it's supposed to be. And, that's like when I
We're
looked
not
at
selling Peloton
Peloton.
very well.
Yeah, it was funny. So, like, when I looked at Peloton in the very beginning when Peloton was started,
Mhm.
because it literally started across the street from my cycling studio
Yeah.
on 23rd Street. Like that, it was. I could see it from my window. I could see the place opening up. It was very funny. Um, my thought was like, man, how's this going to work?
Right.
Like people riding at their house like by themselves. Like I could see like, starting and then falling off very quickly. But they've done an amazing job of
Mhm.
actually creating the environment of that class feel while you're by yourself in your house.
Right.
So I mean, kudos to them. Like it's amazing that they did that. And I don't have a problem personally riding at home.
Right.
Like I can do a hard workout at home by myself because I think I just love cycling so much. And
Mhm.
I do enjoy lifting, but the environment really matters.
Right.
And
It
honestly,
does for
even
me
when
too.
I'm training myself at home, like I don't push as hard as I do if I'm riding with, a Tuesday morning session with my team in Central Park was like, I was always going to ride harder then because it's a competitive nature too, right? Like
Mhm.
that environment draws the best out of us or the
Right.
worst. Um, yeah. So it is like the environment is so key.
Yeah. So kudos to everyone who does their strength work at home and their accessory work at home. And I am going to check out there's a new beta of a Peloton workout for the gym, and I'm going to check that out, I think. But yeah, So that was my big move for this week. I had strength training on the calendar on Monday, and I actually went to the gym and signed up. So I didn't lift anything yet, but there we
And I
go.
love the fact, like, you dropped in there like you're going to see a trainer, see if you like the trainer.
Mhm.
And you've talked about your coach before, your cycling coach. And I love the fact that you have coaches.
I know, because I'm not disciplined. I
And
think
I
that's the
don't.
worst.
Like
I'm the
I just
plumber with leaky pipes. I'm like, and right now it's my coach is my cycling coach. She's like, "Oh, just ride," and I'm like, "Put something on the calendar, please." Because otherwise, left to my own devices, I'll do things I probably shouldn't do, or I won't do anything. And so, yeah, I like the accountability. That's probably the biggest thing that I like. Although I'm letting the cycling coach go so I can pay the strength coach. So
well,
we'll
it's
see how that goes.
part of the time of the year. It makes sense,
It
right? Like,
is. It is.
the cycling coach is not necessarily needed for the
Yeah.
accountability portion at this because
Right.
you can do that yourself
And then
during the
I'll
off
jump
season.
into a program in October. So it'll be
Yeah,
good.
and
Yeah.
it's not uncommon for my athletes to where we'll pause the relationship for a couple months during this time because they can be self
Hmm.
guided,
Right.
right? And if they can handle that self guided nature, then there's no need to have a conversation with me every week,
Yeah.
um, which is fine. Like that's part of the business, and that's always kind of one of my first rules of knowing if you have a good coach or not.
If you can
Like if
do it without them.
yeah, if they're kind of convincing you that you always have to be with them, I'm kind of like, yeah, it's a little desperate. It's probably not good.
Right. Right.
Um, there's times always is like, what do you need?
Yeah.
It's how do I best support the athlete during this time? And
Yeah.
self guided is great, I think.
It is. We
Um,
try to educate. So, good morning, Bob and Rebecca and Will and Maggie. What about you guys? You're all very motivated to do your strength work, or you seem to be. How do you do it? Throw some comments in there. We'll talk about it. I need to get some of that mojo, right?
Teach
And there
me.
is the group thing. There's definitely the group thing, right? And the other place where strength, have you looked at the new Training Peaks strength options?
I haven't. I looked
They're
at like
interesting, I think.
their old, like like you
Yeah,
can build them the two ways. I have not played with the strength
right.
training option yet in there. Again, stuck in my old ways, right? Like I
I
have
know.
all these old things in there that I've created. I do have to play around with it a little bit more
Yeah.
at some point
So
in
I think
time.
they're doing some AI type stuff. And then the other really interesting thing I just saw a preview of is a nutrition product that integrates with Training Peaks. And so it's going to take your activities and take your training and periodize your nutrition for that, which actually was one of the things that I wanted to chat about a little bit was periodized nutrition, right? How do we change our nutrition based on what we're
What we're
doing in our
doing.
training? And definitely there's a difference, especially if you go from a high volume of endurance to doing more strength training and shorter, maybe more intense, because as a master's athlete, we need a little bit of intensity. So Will saying he
Yeah,
has to put everything in the schedule. I agree with that. I've put my training in my calendar, and that's what I need to start doing with strength, I think.
yeah.
So,
You have to. I actually got to have
yeah.
to schedule it into my day. Like I
Right.
need to put it into my work day,
Yeah.
or I'm like
And your
I'm
meals.
never.
That's the other
Oh,
thing I learned
meals
this
for
summer is
sure.
I was because I do these weird blocks of work and then I have a chunk where I can train and then I'm working and I'm like, you got to make sure you have enough time in there to get a pre-workout meal in at some point
Hmm.
and to get my nutrition, my recovery nutrition in as well. If I don't and I was good about putting the workouts in the calendar, but then I was like, "Oh yeah, you haven't eaten in 8 hours. This is no good. You need to figure that
Yep.
piece out." So,
I,
yeah.
I that falls to me every time. Like, cause I'm like,
Yeah.
oh look, I have no trouble finding out when I'm going to fit my ride in. I'm like, oh, I see that chunk of time. No problem. The problem is, I'm
Mhm.
like, I'm booked up until the moment the ride starts, and I'm
Yes.
like, oh, I haven't
Yes.
eaten in 5 hours.
Right.
Like now I got to eat, and then can I just jump right out on the ride on that? Like I do. Like I work best when I actually plan it all out.
Yeah.
And just block out 30 minutes here, block out 30 minutes there, just to get these things in. But it's hard. Like it's
It is
you
hard, and
know
you don't wanna eat too much prior to a hard workout because you're gonna well, there's that, either
Mhm.
gastric distress or you're not gonna get the blood and the oxygen to the working muscles. But at the same time, I'm like, "Well, I don't wanna just eat a Cliff Bar." Nothing against Cliff Bars, of course, but, I don't wanna have sports food as a meal. I wanna have a meal as a meal because otherwise I'm gonna end up short at some point in the next, few days. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I always look at it. I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but I look at, like, when I'm on it,
Mhm.
I look at it properly.
Yeah.
I I look at my, I look at it as like a 24-hour clock. Like
Right.
I always look at food as two things, right? And this kind of goes into the periodization and nutrition kind of thing. Is like when I walk into the kitchen, the first thing I should ask myself is like, why am I eating right now?
Mhm.
And I really have two choices. I'm either eating for fuel, for energy, or I'm eating for nutritional, for repair.
You mean you're
And
not eating for emotions?
yes, well,
That's just me?
repairing my emotional fragility. Um, right. So like I forget who taught me that, but it's like when you walk into the and you're going to grab something to eat, the first question you ask yourself is, why am I eating? What's the purpose of
Mhm.
this? Is it is it fuel or is it
Right.
nutrient value?
Right.
And if it's heading for a workout or I'm just eating because I know I got to go for a ride in 2 hours and I'm actually eating for fuel. So that
Mhm.
Cliff Bar is okay, right? Like
I
it's just
know.
about getting the calories in. I don't care about the nutritional value. If I'm eating for recovery and repair after the workout, things of that nature, then the nutritional value starts to now matter. Where like, yeah, the Cliff Bar is not great, you know, a Buddha bowl or something like that that's going to
Yeah.
have vegetables, a variety of vegetables in there that's going to help replace that nutrients is important, right?
Mhm.
So I always looked at it as 1 hour before my workout, it's always about fuel.
Fuel. Yeah.
During my workout, it's always about fuel. And then the equal time of my workout, post workout, is about fuel. So if it's a 2 hour
Mhm.
ride, I have a 2 hour window where it's about fuel. It's replacing the calories I just ate or just burned through. Once that window closes until 1 hour before my next workout, that could be in the afternoon if you're doing doubles or whatever it might be. But that time window now goes into nutritional repair. So it's
Right.
nutrient. So my choice needs to be nutrient based, vitamins and mineral based, not fuel based. Still fuel based, but
Yeah.
that's the driving factor is choosing, this
The
spinach over
quality
bread.
food. Yeah.
Yeah, spinach over bread. What's an empty calorie,
Don't go
right? Like,
eating on bread.
well, it's just empty,
I know.
right? That's why I say, like, I don't
Yeah.
hate anything. I eat,
Right.
well, I don't eat meat, but I don't hate meat. I love meat,
I don't think
but
I knew you didn't eat meat.
I'm plant based. So I eat a little bit of meat. So
Mhm.
90%
Just
of my calories come from plants, and then maybe 10% a week comes from
yeah.
animal products whatsoever. Um, yeah, and I did that a couple years ago, just from a aspect,
Mhm.
and it was a really interesting change because I did it in the winter. Like, it was already
Right.
like I turned a certain age, and I was just like, it was like my birthday. I was like, you know what, I'm going to do this, and I do everything full boat. Like it's just
Mhm.
like I had a huge carnitas meal, like,
The
and
night
then
before.
the night before, and then the next morning I was just like, that's it. Didn't have meat again for like a year,
Wow.
like
Yeah.
just cold turkey, and was really crazy is in the very beginning felt great.
Mhm.
Recovery, slept, everything, like all that really felt great. But I was doing a lot of short, hard type workouts,
Right.
right? Because it was February, March, April, May. And then once the racing season hit and I was fading like during my
Mhm.
rides, I was fading during the races and stuff like this. And what I had to do was basically a food log. And what I was
Yeah.
realizing is that my calorie content was just so low. Like the
Right.
quality of my food was great. I was getting enough protein, all that stuff, but I just wasn't getting the volume of food
Mhm.
that I was getting in the past because of meat products are just so much more calorie dense,
Dense. Yeah.
you know, that I was
That
just
was
like,
when
oh,
you were really skinny too. You got really skinny for a while.
yeah,
Yeah,
that went
race
away.
weight. A little too much race weight. Yeah, or too little
Well,
race
just
weight.
not enough
Well, one
racing this
my
year.
interesting challenge the last couple of weeks since I've been home, right? So I've been home a week and a day. And I was very disciplined when I was on the road. Even when I was in a hotel, I was making my own breakfast. So I had the same breakfast I would have. I had the same recovery meal. And then I would, the wild card was what would I do for dinner every evening? And what I found now that I'm home that I'm not training, it's like I got into a habit and I tend to eat the same thing all the time because it's easier for me and I can prepare it and I can control it. And yes, I have some food issues. I'll admit that. But um I'm like, oh, I need another meal in my day. On the days I don't work out, I was having, the breakfast meal, the dinner meal, or it might have been a lunch meal, and then the recovery food. And I was like, I don't want to eat the recovery food for a meal because it's like cottage cheese and protein powder and fruit and all that. I'm like, I need another meal. I have to figure this out because I've been. So then of course, it's like, oh, but there's, Pizza My Heart is next door. Pizza My Heart is like the original California pizza place. So, I'm like,
It's
"Okay,
hard.
you gotta stop this, Lori." So, not that there are good foods and bad foods, but it was like, I should be, what am I doing for vegetables here? I need more vegetables in my life, and yeah, so we're
Yeah, I
working on it.
started vegetables and fruits are really like, but really, honestly,
The
I mean, plant
key.
based is the key, right? Because
Yeah.
that's a really our nutrients. That's our vitamins, our minerals,
Mhm.
our gut health, and all that stuff kind of plays into this. And they basically said, I forget which, maybe it was Fiber Fueled, the book Fiber Fueled, which is a great book for everybody to read. Um, Talks about basically your goal is to get 30 different plants a week,
Yeah.
right? And now that can be fresh herbs as well, like fresh cilantro can be counted as a plant, a different type of apple. So you could eat three
Mhm.
different varieties of apples and things like that. And that was the first thing I tried when I went to plant based. I was like, all right, I'm going to try to get this. Like, can I get 30 different in? And you
That's a
can.
lot.
It seems like a lot, but it actually isn't, right? Because you like when you start to like log it for a week, try it.
Mhm.
You'll be shocked that you get pretty close without trying, but you do really have to try to get like this last couple. And the idea is to get more than 30, right? But at least a
Yeah,
minimum of 30.
and the
And I
variety, because different fruits and different vegetables give us different nutrients,
yeah,
which is
so I
what's
did it
wrong
with
with my nutrition, right? I
and
eat the same thing every day.
I did it with my kids. And I
Ah,
said, you get $1 for every different fruit you eat during like every fruit and vegetable that you eat during the week, right? You just
right.
got to log it. You just got to tell me, so like, 30 bucks. Like if you do all 30, you get 30, right? If you do under 30, you don't get anything. So you got to at least hit 30. That's the threshold. But if you do 50, you get 50 bucks.
Yeah.
Right. And I capped them at, I think it was like 70 bucks or something like that. They never got over 50. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
Like I knew that was a pretty safe bet. Um, but it was like,
I'll play
it's a
that game
good
with you.
challenge. Oh, I'm not paying you, but hey, I'll give you kudos. I'll give you like
Yeah, I
50
know.
kudos.
I'll put them on
Um,
Strava. I ate my 30 vegetables this week. I
but
know.
it's a good little game, like to try to give yourself like 1 point for every
Mhm.
different vegetable and plant that you eat throughout the week. And, you know, it does add up. Like you're like, think about a salad. If you do put like, you just throw like a little basil in there, like
Mhm.
it's another plant, as long as it's fresh, not dried.
I always have a
Um,
basil plant on my counter, so
but
it's
like
good.
think about even my oatmeal, like it would be oats and flaxseed and hemp hearts and
Mhm.
chia. And like you're next thing you know, you got like 8 different things in your oatmeal. You're like, all right, this is not
And you're
that
pooing
bad.
like a champ, right?
Exactly right.
Yeah, I gotta go there.
Gotta go
Yeah,
there.
I think it's an interesting what I'm realizing as we're discussing this is I think of food as fuel, and I think of it as it's like a business relationship. What I have not been embracing lately is food as kind of the festivity of food, of sharing a meal with someone, because I've been so stringent about my training.
Mhm.
So, also in my social life and my social riding, which I haven't done enough, I think I need to do a little more social dining. Um, Maybe even make my own food and share a picnic or that kind of thing, so I don't have to stress out about restaurants because I do. But
Yeah,
yeah,
and restaurants are tough because you don't control it, right? You don't
yeah,
really control what's the
yeah.
quality of those things.
And I
Um,
think what's happened as I've aged, of course, and I think I've talked to a lot of folks who have the same challenges. There are certain foods that my body just doesn't want anymore. Like red meat is really hard. I don't want it. And I used to eat red meat almost daily. And then all of a sudden I found, oh, look, your ferritin is really low and you're falling asleep randomly. And maybe you need to force yourself to do this or supplement with iron or
or
whatever.
find it another
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, so lots of spinach or whatever. But, yeah, it's, food's a very contentious topic among athletes too. I think we can use exercise to manipulate our food intake and vice versa, and, we have to be careful there, but I think thinking of it as fuel is probably and a lot of people in the Peloton world fast and
Mm,
work out fasted, which is not ideal. It has a pretty negative impact on insulin response and cortisol levels, and so I would say really rethink if you're especially if you're an early morning, trainer, of what you're putting in just before your workouts. Maybe it's just half a banana or a banana and a little bit of almond butter or something just to get your body working the way it should. You may not feel the difference in your workouts, but you'll definitely feel the difference in times during the day, how hungry you are during the day, how well you sleep, because cortisol affects all of those things, that stress hormone. So,
yeah,
um,
cortisol is stress. The same thing we're
yeah,
doing to our body, and additional
right.
cortisol can lead to overtraining, right? And
Yeah.
this is something like I had to deal with my New York City athletes all the time. Is like they're stressed people. They
Yeah,
they live in a stressful city, they have stressful jobs, they have stressful
right.
lives, and then they're trying to jam in 15 hours of training on top of that. And you're just
Yeah,
like, well, no, your body doesn't understand the difference between
right.
athletic stress and emotional
Life
stress. It's
stress.
stress. It's just
Yeah.
stress. And food can play into that for some people, especially if we're not eating the proper foods for us. And
Mhm.
URA is contentious. And I don't think, if you really look at all the diets out there,
Yeah.
whether it's plant based, vegan, or um, all meat, like there's
Mhm.
the paleo diet, like all these, like there's so many different diets out there. And I would never say one is good or bad, or
Mhm.
like you do what's best for you. But
Right.
what you want to do is look at what's the commonality between all those diets, right?
Calorie restriction or
Yeah,
time-based
for
restriction. Yeah.
diet, but really, if you really look at most of those, like the Mediterranean diet and all these, like what
Mhm.
we would deem as kind of healthy
Right.
kind of diets, is most of them are based on whole foods.
Mhm.
That's it. It's non-processed food. It's just eliminating sugar. It's eliminating the process aspect of that, right? It's just some eat meat and some don't eat meat. Some
Right.
eat grains, some don't eat grains, right? It's just these small little differences. But when you look at 80% of that diet, it's whole food based, you know? And I think if people just kind of take the similarities of the diets and understand what the purpose is, then you don't have to worry about what you're excluding. Let's not worry about
Mhm.
what we're excluding. Let's worry about what we're actually eating.
Right.
Okay, like, oh, I don't eat that. Yeah, but you're eating, French fries by the large sack, and from White Castle. Like, who knows? Like yes, it's plant based, but it's not
Mhm.
healthy plant based. Like, let's not worry about what we exclude. Let's worry about what we include. I think
Right.
that's probably the best thing for diet. And the periodization part of it is that's
What
why I
are your
use the
needs
clock.
when you're
What are your
training, and what are your
needs?
needs when you're recovering? And yeah, and they're gonna be
And
different in hard weeks versus recovery weeks, or during this transition period when all I really wanna eat is ice cream, and I know I can't. But
exactly.
it's like, "Wait a minute, don't I get to eat ice cream for 2 weeks while I'm
Yeah,
recovering?"
and your volume of training
Ah.
drops dramatically,
Oh,
right? You go
yeah.
from doing 20 hours a week to doing 10 hours a week,
Yeah.
right? Well, that changes how much fuel I need. I
Mhm.
can't still eat. Your body doesn't know that though.
Right.
Your body takes weeks for it to realize this change in
Mhm.
volume. It just assumes like, yeah, you're still training 20 hours a week, so it's still getting hungry at 10 a.m. It's still getting hungry at 1. It's still getting hungry at these time frames. So understanding like, oh no, well, yes, I can still eat right now, but I'm going to choose something that's more nutrient dense rather than
Right.
calorically dense, right? Like,
Right.
I'm going to grab a handful of baby carrots or whatever it might be.
Mhm.
Like, that's, to me, that's periodizing your nutrition along with what's going on with your training. Like,
Yeah.
also, like, if I'm, like these fasted states,
Mhm.
and where did it all come from? And the idea is I'm going to use more. I'm going to teach my body how to use fat as an energy source.
Yeah.
That's all great,
Yeah.
awesome. Like, that's your purpose, but understand that your workout has to match that demand. I can't go fasted and then be like, all right, well, I'm going to go do a hit and hill
Right.
workout that's going to have me in zone 3, 4, and 5. That's going to require glycolysis. Like,
Right.
that's not like you better be in zone 1 and low zone 2 if you're going to be doing a fasted state and you're focusing on fat burn, right? Because at those intensities, I can allow fat to be used as an energy source. Remember, once we get to zone 3, we're now switching over, I most likely, to a more kind of
Glycogen based.
sugar glycogen based energy
Yeah.
need, right? So that's what I have a problem most with when I see people trying to do like a fat adapted diet, is that they're not matching their workouts appropriately or training plan appropriately to that
Mhm.
type of diet. These things have to be the same. You
Right.
can't, they don't work in silos, unfortunately.
Yeah. And it's, yeah, and we won't even talk about going to the gym with the treadmill and it says, "This is your fat burning zone," and all the myths about that, but
Which is
yeah.
also great, and the same thing is like, oh man, this goes into so many kind of rabbit holes
I
as so
know.
far as like fat
The
burning zone
myths.
is a great, right? But you better
Right.
be in it for hours.
Right.
Like,
It's
it's
like I'm gonna burn
fine.
more calories at higher intensity, and yeah, it's a different makeup of what, the fuel my body is using, but
Sure.
yeah, anyways,
And it
this is
goes
starting to get
into,
down the rabbit hole of
I know, but it does.
exercise and diet and weight loss and
That's
all
what
that,
we're
and I hate
talking
to go
about.
there. I know. We're talking about fuel, though. Fuel.
Well, weight loss is that's
Yeah.
that comes
Performance,
and goes.
maybe. Yeah.
I think that's a whole different thing. That's
Yeah.
you
But I'm
know
with you, Rebecca. I gotta pay attention to how I'm fueling, and I think if we listen to our body, we're gonna know. We'll know what we're missing. If you're not recovering well, if you're not able to hit your marks in your workouts, there's all the cues. We have to listen. But yeah. What else is going on? Recovery. It's recovery week.
every week.
Woohoo! Everybody's favorite, least favorite week. Um, what are the things that you do during recovery week that you don't do during training weeks, Brian?
Um,
Or
Sleep
do you
more.
do everything? Yeah, sleep more,
I
definitely.
try to do all the same. Like
Mhm.
I try to keep my recovery protocols as
Daily.
close daily as I can. And I love the fact that the Whoop bracelets and stuff came out a couple of years ago, where recovery became an active thing.
Mhm.
Like monitoring your recovery was an active, not a passive thing. Like before, recovery was about taking time off and relaxing, and you couldn't quantify it necessarily, so you always
Right.
felt like you were losing, right? You're like, oh my god, I'm wasting time. Where now, like, you can win recovery. I'm like, oh, what's your
Mhm.
strain? What's your recovery score today?
Right.
Things like that. Like, it feels like it's an active participant and it takes priority. Um, yeah, I have a hard thing with recovery and recovery modalities. I'm a skeptic,
Yeah.
right? I'm a huge freaking skeptic. Like, something comes
How
out, I
many
don't
things
believe
are
in.
good for our brain versus good for our body, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like the pseudoscience and stuff like that. And recovery modalities, I think most of them are more about your brain than it is about your body.
Yeah. But it's your nervous system. And so I think there is value in that. Like when I started running, I started using Normatec, so the squeezy legs. And I have
Mhm.
the calf sleeves and I have the full leg sleeves. And every morning when I wake up, I do a soft entry into the world. And I drink my cup of coffee and I play with my cat. And I put my squeezy legs on for at least 15 minutes, usually for 30. And what is it doing? It's kind of easing me in without that kind of startled spike, unless I'm going running, and then I go run first. Sometimes I do it at night too as a way to downregulate and to help me ease into the state of rest from my active day. And I think
Yeah.
there's value in that when I have a modality that locks me down for a while, like putting on a Normatec boot or whatever. It forces me to downregulate. It forces me to make that transition from work to my daily life. So I think that's good. Yeah, don't be lazy,
Yeah.
Bob.
Yeah,
I
so
know. I feel lazy too. Hi,
you know,
Jeff,
the
by the way.
the idea of, like, the placebo effect, right? Is it
Yeah,
actually working, or is it just making you think it's working?
right.
Well, the idea there is a placebo effect has an effect.
It does.
It's an effect, right? It's a
Mhm.
placebo effect. Yes, it's not working the way you think it's working, but it's doing
Right.
something to you that's improving it. I use the Normatec boots. I have compression boots as well. And for everybody out there, Normatec boots can be expensive. I've also had the knockoff pair, like via Amazon, like 150 bucks. Honestly, I couldn't tell you the difference the
Yeah.
next day. Like, while
I
they're
will
on, yes,
say
but they
Hyperice
work
has really good
so
customer
good.
service though, because I was having an issue with one of mine. They just sent me a brand new pair
Yeah,
and
but
let me keep the old
150,
pair.
150 bucks, I could buy 10 of them before I buy
I
one
know.
pair of
I know.
Normatex.
Yeah.
Um, I got my Normatex through a deal where I wouldn't have had them because
Right.
I had the cheap ones. I literally had the knockoff pair that
Yeah.
were perfectly fine that I gave away to somebody else. Um, so
But it
yeah,
brings
like
up the question, how much of our manipulation is does stretching help me? Does using a Theragun or a Normatec or
yeah,
massage or trigger point, do any of those help me be a better athlete? Do they help recover? Do they help prevent injury? Do they help my brain and my nervous system? So there's not a lot of research, I think, that's actually solid in this as far as knowing what
that's
actually
exactly
is
right.
aiding recovery and what is not.
So
But if it
the
makes us feel
science
like it is, it's good.
the science behind most of this stuff is not strong,
Right.
or it's applied to a different population. Like the
Mhm.
Normatec boots, they were created for diabetics. That's why
Yeah.
they were created. All right. Same thing with compression sleeves. Right. This
Mhm.
was all about diabetics and pooling of the blood down in the lower limbs and kind of getting it to kind of recycle back through. There's no there's no reason why we would think somebody who's running a marathon would have pooling in their blood within
Right.
their feet. Like their calf is super strong and you're running and like it's usually not needed.
So
Um,
why do so many runners and triathletes wear compression, like knee-high socks when they run? Does it make them feel good?
because most of the articles say that you should,
Ah,
right? And most of the pro athletes are also wearing them.
yeah,
And, you know,
but they're probably sponsored.
well, they are sponsored
Yeah.
by them. And, just because an umbrella is associated with the rain doesn't mean that umbrella brings the rain, right?
Ooh,
Like the rain is going to be there regardless if the umbrella was or not. When
right.
a pro athlete's using a product, it's not because of the product that makes them a pro athlete, right? Don't associate the two together.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, most of it's think about where most of us get our information from is through magazines, right?
Or
Through
social media these
social media
days.
nowadays.
I was like, "What's a
Um,
magazine, Brian?"
tell me right. You're like, how old are you?
I know.
You and your 8-track records,
Yeah.
8-track tapes. Yeah, so most of it is brought to us through media. Media is obviously writing the articles based on who's advertising
Right.
for the most part, right? So it's not science that we're looking
Mhm.
at. It's just what we think works and we follow the trends. And
Right.
again, compression gear, compression gear was like one of those first things that kind of came out where I was I don't get it. I don't
Yeah.
get compression gear. Like, I don't understand it. I think it can help reduce swelling
Mhm.
after wearing it as a recovery tool, maybe not during the exercise, but after the exercise. But then again, swelling is a natural part of our recovery process.
Yeah.
So if we're
It
limiting
can
the
be
swelling and
uncomfortable, though.
inflammation, it can actually limit how we're actually recovering.
Right.
Um,
I
so
mean, I
all
can
these
tell you
things.
I had a DVT, so a deep vein thrombosis in
Mhm.
2003, so a long time ago. But I get edema in that leg because it went from my groin to my ankle, and it had to do with food poisoning and a long haul flight and all these things. But I didn't have any genetic factors. But I have some incompetent veins, and meaning they don't work well, so they're not
Right.
pumping the way that they should. And I wear compression socks when I fly. That makes it
For
feel
sure.
better. Sometimes when I'm in the studio, if I'm on my feet for 8, 10 hours a day, I feel discomfort in that leg. I get a lot of swelling and it's not comfortable. And so I do wear the compression stuff.
Swelling
Um,
causes more swelling. That's
I
the
know.
that's the problem with swelling. That's why I take anti-inflammatories at times.
Yeah.
But some swelling is a positive,
Yes, because
right?
it's
Some swelling is
recovery, it's
clearing
healing.
out the damage that's done in the
Hmm.
muscle. So limiting some swelling, yes, but if swelling is causing more swelling,
Yeah.
then it's a negative thing. And I think that's where a lot of this stuff comes into it. This recovery stuff is, you know, we're trying to reduce this inflammation, but yet some
Hmm.
inflammation is positive. So if we do reduce the inflammation too much, are we actually reducing our ability to actually improve? Are
Hmm.
we not? Because we get the benefit from working out during the rebuilding process. So if we're hindering the rebuilding process, we're not getting the benefit that we should be. And I think
Right.
that's where a lot of these recovery modalities really come into, like, we don't know if they're positive or if they're negative. We really, for a lot of them, we don't.
Right.
Um, the one thing that we do know is great for recovery is sleep. And
Hmm.
somebody mentioned it, Maggie mentioned
Maggie.
it in there. Is
Yeah.
like sleep is the only proven recovery modality for athletes. That's it. The only other thing that comes close is sensory deprivation. Float
Mm.
tanks, if you've ever
Yeah.
done one,
Which are
which are
so fun.
so
I
amazing,
shouldn't
so
say that,
amazing.
but it's just, yeah.
Love them. And the only reason that they have shown to work is it's basically taking a nap.
Yeah. Downreg.
Right? That downregulate. There's no sensory. Your body doesn't know what's going on. It's not taking in any input whatsoever. So therefore, it has time to recover.
Right.
And so sleeping and sleep deprivation or napping are really the only true things that allow us to recover proven wise. You
Sensory
know,
deprivation, not sleep deprivation. Just wanna make sure.
sensory, yes,
Yeah.
sensory deprivation, not sleep
Yeah.
deprivation, opposite.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so I prioritize sleep. And,
Mhm.
before COVID, I ran a cycling studio in New York City. I was there every day at 5 a.m. I was getting
Yeah.
up every day around 3:30 a.m., right? Pretty much every day, 3:30 to 4 a.m. And I started as a personal trainer. So I started this right out of college, essentially, since 1999 up until 2020. I was averaging approximately anywhere from 4.5 to 5.5 hours of sleep every day.
Yeah.
and that was normal. I could function. Like I was a functioning human being, right? And then all of a sudden COVID hit and I'm sleeping until 7 or 8 o'clock every day, getting 8 or 9 hours of rest. And I immediately felt like 10 years younger. I was like,
Right.
oh my God. Like I was a functioning alcoholic essentially.
Yeah.
Right. Like, yes, I was functioning driving a car and everything was like totally normal, but I was not functioning at my actual peak
Right. Right.
ability. Like it was just my norm was so screwed. So like that showed me immediately how important sleep and rest really were, even from my performances
Yeah.
perspective.
And
Like
I think
it's
that's why this time of season, this time of year is really challenging for people because we're shifting our schedule. Like I'm waking up now and I have to set an alarm because it's not getting light early enough. And normally in the summer, I'll wake up at 5 or 6, somewhere in there without an alarm. And now I'm like, oh, it's really dark when I set my alarm for 6. And it's getting dark at night. And so I start to lose my motivation. And then I'm like, when do I sleep? And it's always the transition for me, the transition to the lovely clock changes. That cause a lot of sleep deprivation for me because my body takes some time to figure it out again. And of course, traveling and being in different time zones doesn't help, but
so
yeah.
stressful. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing too, is like what's the quality of sleep that you're getting?
Mhm.
Right. And this is where like your HRV and things kind of come into play is, and alcohol and things of this nature
Right.
come into play. Yeah, I had a client who she's training for a marathon and we're doing it rapidly. She was out of the mix for a while and she called me like this Wednesday, like freaking out, like her run felt horrible. She felt like super exhausted and all this stuff. I was like, well, what'd you do this weekend? Like, what was happening? Like, she had a long run. She did her long run on Sunday. And then Sunday night, she went to someone's retirement party and she danced all night in high heels.
Ugh.
All night. She's like, oh, we were on the dance floor for 3, 4 hours. She's like, I wasn't expecting it. It was great. We had so much fun. And then Tuesday, her run was horrible. I was like, well, yeah, of course it was.
Right.
You were dancing all night. Like you went for an hour and 40-minute run, which is the longest run she's done to this point, and then you went dancing. Like if you did that same dancing, like when we think of like dancing and stuff like on at a party, we don't think of it as a workout. We just think we're dancing. But yeah,
Right.
if you go to a health club and take a dance class for an hour, you're like, woof, man, I had such a hard workout today. You're like, well, you just did that for 3 hours the weekend before, like in a nightclub. Like it's still
Mhm.
working out. It's still energy, right? So I think we also have to look at just like what are the other things we're doing in our lives that impact that. And then when she goes to sleep, is she really, and she's having some drinks, which she doesn't drink all that often, but she's at this party and drinks, and then she goes to bed. I'm like, well, think about it. Like your body's not resting at
Mhm.
night. Like it was actually more stressful at night when you're sleeping because your body's now also trying to fight off this poisonous alcohol that was in
Right.
there. So you're also not only did you dance for 3 hours, but when you slept, you didn't get the quality sleep that you would normally
Mhm.
get. So by Monday, you woke up, you were sleep deprived, you were calorie deprived, your body was broken down. I was like, so yeah, by Tuesday, like we had to take a rest week this week, which was
Right.
not scheduled because I was like, you
Yeah.
just overdid it on the weekend, right? Like we had to pull back to allow recovery to occur. But all these things play like recovery is tough. It's
It
really,
is.
really hard.
It is. And I think if we want to succeed at these workouts, we have to take recovery seriously, and I don't think everyone does. So we
No.
don't take those rest days, we don't take the recovery intervals, we don't we're so programmed to go hard all the time in our lives, and if we're not going hard, we're not actually doing what we're supposed to do, and I would say it's awesome to go easy. We have to let ourselves go easy. Take the
Yeah, there's
rest
a
days.
great book that I read a couple years ago about recovery modalities,
Mhm.
and it's written for the skeptic for sure. They definitely talk about all these different things, and they talk about the science behind it
Mhm.
and how you can easily manipulate science or the study to show it what you want it to show. And she uses
Right.
this great like analogy of like using Gatorade versus beer as a recovery tool and how beer outperforms Gatorade actually
Oh,
as
interesting.
a recovery tool. Which I used to actually make that argument before I saw this book,
Stop
which
doing.
is actually why I read the book because I was like, hey, beer has carbohydrates in it, just like
Right.
Gatorade does, but it also has some protein in it too, right? Like it technically is a better one minus the alcohol, which can
Yeah.
limit. But non-alcoholic beer would be better than Gatorade. But she goes into it's like saying, and she really shows like how you can manipulate the numbers to show that this is a benefit or not. And she goes through a whole bunch of different modalities, Normatec boots, all these things, cryotherapy versus cold plunging
Mm.
and things of that nature. And it does boil down to being sleep and sensory deprivation being the only good thing. But I'll put that book in Facebook today. It's called Good to
Yeah.
Go. It's really great. It's a good read. I think everyone should read it, honestly, because I think it just opens our eyes to, you know, understanding what we should really be looking for when we see something
Mhm.
pop up on Instagram or Facebook or
Yeah.
in a news article about, oh, here's the newest,
Mhm.
you know, phase of, fad to
Training,
do.
recovery, and yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a lot of misinformation out there, but, um,
totally.
well, let's talk about this week real quick. So we have a live ride on Saturday this week with Matt, 8 a.m. Eastern, and then again, we'll look at on-demand times, 11 a.m., 2 p.m., all Eastern. If you have another time you wanna ride, throw it out there and tell your teammates. Next week, Matt's gonna be is Berlin next week? He's
I
he's
don't know.
not riding live next week. I think Berlin is coming up. Anyways, we have a ride with Christian Vandeveld, which everybody has really enjoyed those. So we've got an on-demand ride there. We can post some ride times and encourage people to do the same thing and ride together, or you can post your ride times individually and let people know. Always more fun with our teammates on the leaderboard. Hashtag Team Wilpers Cycling. And what about naps? Of course, naps are
Naps
great,
are
but they have to
amazing.
be short and not too long. The best nap is an espresso nap, right? You take a shot of
I was
espresso.
just going to say that. Yeah.
Right, that's my favorite. You lay down, you take your nap, 20 minutes later, the espresso kicks in and you're ready to go. And oh, yeah, so Berlin is the 28th. So, yeah, that's the day we are riding with Christian instead of Matt, but we'll cheer Matt on from the leaderboard. Um, yeah, so espresso naps. Naps are awesome. And for a long time, I couldn't nap, and then I napped too much when I was having some thyroid issues, and now I'm back to like, I can take a nap, a planned nap. That's good. So, um, yeah, that's about it. But next week, week 5, so we start building up again, and yeah, make sure you take some recovery this week. Recovery doesn't mean do nothing. Recovery means reduce our volume, maybe reduce our intensity, let our body heal, and get ready for the next bump up. So, anything
Correct.
on your side, Brian, that we should
Same.
think about?
Found the same deal. Nothing special this week other than
Yeah,
pulling back, right? And pulling
yeah,
back is the job. That's what we're doing. We're doing less so we can recover from what we're doing,
hmm,
right? And I always like to think of recovery weeks as this is when I get the benefit for the last 3 or 4 weeks, and it also is the time for me to prepare for the next 3 or 4 weeks,
yeah.
right? If I kind of push through this week, I'm that type of person that doesn't like to take a little time off, and like I can't lose a step, right? And you're going to push through. Well, what's that going to do? That's going to negatively affect your next couple of weeks. So you're not
Hmm.
going to be you're not going to be as effective in weeks 5, 6, 7, and 8. So I'm going to
Yeah.
get more work done by taking a step back right now than I
Right.
will if I try to push through here and then by week 7 or 8, I'm really kind of struggling and not getting through the work that I want to get through.
Yeah.
So, it's always understanding like what's the plan? Let's not have a concept of a plan. Let's actually have an actual plan.
Don't go
Right.
there. Be
so,
careful. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we have a good solid plan here, and like it's a planned pullback, which means
Hmm.
follow the plan, pull it back a little bit, and we get to work harder next week.
Yeah.
So that's key. Yeah, it's just follow as is. There's a
Good.
reason it's there.
Awesome. I'm trying to think what else we got to talk about. I think that's about it. So, lots of good info about recovery, about nutrition, and yeah, that's that. Let's ride bikes.
I'm gonna go jump in my cold plunge now after
You
this,
do that. Okay.
which I do
And
have a
I'm,
cold plunge. My wife
do
is.
you?
Oh, we do. My wife bought it,
Ah,
and then I started
man.
using it because I was like, if we have it anyway, then
Yeah,
I guess
might
I
as well
have
use
to.
it. I
Yeah,
can't
it
do
makes
it.
sense.
I
But
cannot do it. There's a great resort here in Carmel Valley, called Refuge, and they're a hydrothermal resort, right? So it's at a country club, and they have hot sauna or wet sauna, dry sauna. They have relaxation rooms where it's just kind of chill and there's music and misty, and you lay
mhm.
on these. They have cold plunge, they have warm plunge, they have hot plunge. I'm like, warm. I like warm and maybe
Yeah, well,
hot.
it's going through the
And the
cycle is what you're
cold,
supposed to do.
oh, I know you are, and I just can't do it. I'm
You
like,
have
I
to. I gotta say, you gotta practice it. Like, it takes a
I
while.
know.
Like, I didn't really read into it all that much. My wife had, and I was like, all right, I'll try this thing. I'll start diving in. So, like, the first time I did it, like, like 30 seconds a minute, I was like, I gotta get out of this thing, right?
Yeah,
And then, of course, like 2 days later, I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna do 2 minutes. Got to 2 minutes, and then I was like, okay, I just gotta get past 2 minutes. I'll do like 5 minutes. And once you get past 2 minutes, it's all about the same.
I
And
can't
then,
do
of
it.
course, my mentality, right? Again, not looking into this, I was like, oh, I heard my wife say 10 minutes at some point in time. So I was like, all right.
Right.
So within the first week, I got to like 10 minutes. So then, of course, after that, I'm like, well, how long are you supposed to do this? 20 minutes? So then I got up to like 15 minutes. And my wife's like, how long are you doing it for? I was like, well,
It's
I'm up
supposed to be
between like
what,
10
9
and
minutes
15 minutes,
total in a week, I
like
think is
7 or 8. Like
yeah,
they say like 5 to 8 minutes is like that kind of sweet spot
yeah.
area. I was like, oh, I was trying to get to 20 minutes. She's like, you're an idiot.
You're not. I know.
She's like, "Do you have to do everything to the extreme?" I'm like, "I guess."
Extreme
I'm like,
recovery. The closest I can get is I do put my shower to cold just on my legs. I don't
see,
let
I
it go
can't
anywhere
do
else.
that.
Oh, I could
That
do it
drives me
at the
nuts.
end, just for a couple minutes, but
Yeah.
yeah.
You gotta try
Anyways,
cold plunge. You just gotta do it consistently, get past the
so
2 minute
next
mark,
week on our
and you'll
on
be good.
our YouTube, we will maybe do a cold plunge. We'll see you out on the porch, right?
No, you don't wanna see that.
Okay, and on that note, have a good week, everybody. Post up thoughts, questions, group rides, and, yeah, train smart. Is that what we're supposed to say? Something like
That's right, train smart. I think
that. Yeah,
that's tagline.
something like that. Awesome. Have a
Trademark.
good one,
All
everybody.
right, guys. Bye-bye.